WOLFPACK, assemble! Assemble. What's going on? It's TC and this is Mixdown Advice. Firstly, if you're new to the WOLFPACK, a very warm welcome, and if you're not, welcome back. If you find any of the information in this video useful, please smash the like button. If you're not already part of the community, part of the WOLFPACK, hit the subscribe button to receive notifications every time I upload some fresh new information. That's click on the little bell and then click on the thing next to it and then go up one for the notifications. Also, don't forget to check out my samples and presets for Serum, Vital, Massive, FMA. Check out my t-shirts and hats. Follow my Anthems playlist on Spotify. Follow my Twitter, Instagram and Facebook. Links in the description. So this is some of my Mixdown advice. I've got a few little tips that might be useful for you when you're doing mixdowns. So whenever I talk to fellow producers, I often hear that the part they dislike about making tunes, the part of the process that they dislike the most, is mixdowns and mastering. I did a little video on mastering that I will link up here somewhere around there, and it's just basically talking about the mastering. But a lot of people really bellyache about mixdowns, and mixdowns are actually one of the most favorite parts for me when making tunes. I love mixdowns because it's the finality of putting that last bit of love into the tune to make it what it's going to finally be. Not everything that I say in this video is correct for you, whatever music you're making. It may not be the right thing, but it's all just food for thought on the production side of things. So the thing I love about it is you're bringing order into chaos, and the nature of what we're doing when it comes to a mixdown is basically, if you were to have a tune and it just had drums, bass and some music, then you would just be trying to level those parts together. So, you know, there's different rules about how you can mix different parts together. Usually key features in a track is going to be the drums and bass in a drum and bass tune. So, you know, generally if you have them hitting around the same levels on the on meters, they're going to be balanced together. It might be that sometimes the EQ balance of those different sounds will mean that one wants to be a little bit louder than the other, but in general your kick and your bass and your snare are going to be similar levels when you're hitting it. But it's all mainly down to ear, like listening with your ears as opposed to looking on meters. But I did once work with a producer who used to just do it visually, and actually his mixdowns were really good. So the general nature of what we're doing is taking all the parts of a tune and leveling them up in the mix so that they flow in a good way. And one way of making everything so that it gels really well is to make every part work on its own. So you've got your drums, you've got your bass, you've got your vocals, you've got synths, and even when you break it down, you've got kick, snare, hats, shakers, percussion. And if each of those different elements works on its own, almost as like a song or as a part in itself, so making sure that each part is interesting throughout the whole tune and putting it in a space, so even just like the slightest touches of reverbs and delays to give it a bit of a stereo image, but just giving that love and care to each single instrument or sound or effect or vocal or anything in a track is going to really help to, when you bring them all together, to make them fit and gel together. If you go too crazy with effects, then you're going to end up with a bit of a mess. So it's about like slight touches and flavors from my point of view. Obviously, I'm not always right about my advice, but you have to sort of think, this is my ethos, my kind of theory about how I approach a mixdown. And at the end of the day, it's all about balance. So you're balancing up the different parts so that they gel together. And then a lot of times I'll do a mixdown into my final chain of plugins to like smash it out and add a little EQ. But I only do that because I already know what that chain sounds like. And a lot of times, if I was just starting out, I think I would want to do the mixdowns without any plugins on the final channel and hear what it sounds like without anything on the final channel, because then you're getting a clear representation of what your mixdown actually is without the parts interacting with each other, because as soon as you start putting plugins onto multiple parts being mixed together, they're going to interact with one another. So the bass and the kick might distort the sub a little bit as it kicks in because you're squashing it all down. In terms of vocals, Some really good advice that I received back in day was that if you get the vocal to sit where you think it should be in the mix, so you can hear every single word in the song, it's balanced with all the other instruments, and then just turn it up by 2 dB. You really want those vocals to stand out. Depending on what kind of a track it is, that might be a bit more of the kind of on a poppy kind of sense. But I hear so many tracks where the vocals are like below the levels of other things in there, and I want to hear vocals above the music, really, because most of what's being said is really important in the song, in the vocal. So it's crucial you can hear what is going on or hear every single word in that vocal. When it comes to bass and drums, the kick drum and the bass, if you look at a spectrum analyzer, generally I will have the kick and the bass hitting in this around the same level. But this is kind of an EQ thing as well, because obviously I'm looking at a spectrum analyzer. So you'll see the kick peak and then you'll see a bass peak, and around the same level is where I would personally be looking at getting those kicks and those basses to get them to gel together. And then the snare, obviously there's a peak at around 200 usually on a snare. That's the resonance of the skin on a snare drum. So if you were to take the snare off, it's like turn the snare off, which is the fizzy part. Usually it's just like a doo, which actually has a note which will resonate around a certain frequency. So having that sitting at the same level as the kick, the snare and the bass, and then it'll be like lined up in it sort of between, the bass will be like 50 hertz, the kick will be in 100 hertz, the snare will be between 200 hertz kind of resonance. As you move forward using a spectrum analyzer and doing your mix downs, you'll be able to identify the different parts by visually seeing what they look like. So once you've got the balance sounding really nice, in Logic and in Ableton, if I'm clipping my final channel, I will select all the channels and then turn them all down so that the final channel is peaking around, and this is without any kind of mastering plugin. So all the plugins off on the final, and then having it peaking between -6 and -12. And that will give you enough headroom for those plugins on the final chain to be able to do whatever processing they're going to do. So let's say on my final channel, I've got an EQ and I want to add 2 or 3 decibels of top end. If I'm already at 0, and I add that 2 or 3 decibels, it's going to go into clipping land, and plugins start to work in a funny way when they start to clip. So if you've got -6 to -12 of headroom, you can make changes to the EQ and the compression without having internal clipping within the plugins. So turning off the master chain, getting it to the right level, and then doing the master chain is something that I would do. And also there's a thing where once you get your master chain on there, it might be that some parts get lost, and a lot of times the mix down before the master chain might sound quite different to the mix down after the master chain at exactly the same level. And having your kick and your snare and maybe hats a little louder than is comfortable pre-master, and then after the master, they're almost going to duck the other parts because there's only room for a certain amount of stuff within that bandwidth. And as there's compression, obviously if a loud snare comes in, it's going to duck all of the other parts. And that's kind of the idea behind gelling a song together. So I guess it's quite a lot of stuff to get your head around, but the simplistic way of looking at it is just to get a clean balance and to have every part work on its own so that you're not relying on mastering to keep the song interesting. There's nothing that mastering is going to do or the final master chain is going to do to help your tune be better. So the tune has to be a fire tune, and then the mix has to be like punchy and well balanced, and then when you put that master chain on there, it's going to be sick. So if you found anything in this video interesting, please smash the like button. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell for notifications so you can keep up to date with all this new from me. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you have any ideas for future videos, I read all your comments. Don't forget to check out my sites in the description below for presets and samples. They really are incredible value for money, and you might get a sound that will bring you that Beatport #1. What? A massive big up to all the WOLFPACK. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video very soon. Pow, pow, pow.